February was a month of procrastination for me. Procrastination of studying. So what did I do instead of studying? I read books, specifically Kindle Unlimited books. So let me give you a recap of all the books I read in February. There are some physical books, there are some highlights, there are some ebooks. Let's get into these. Hi, hello, and welcome everybody to this new video. Today, we are talking about all the books I read in February. Technically, I read 21 books last month, okay? Out of those 21 books, 3 are Draco and Hermione fanfiction. If you're interested in seeing those and my thoughts on those, I'm not gonna mention them at all in this video. They're up here, okay? I made this video last week. You can watch this up here if you're interested. First things first, this is not a spoiler video. I have to say that because there is one very spoiler-prone book in here that I'm not gonna spoil you for. Of course, the book I'm talking about is this one, okay? This will be the last book that I mention to you, just because if you don't want to see my opinions on it, I'm just gonna mention them in the end. If you do want to see my opinions, you can also skip to the end. I'm gonna put little timestamps for all the books that I read, okay? I read a lot of books, but I think with the amount of books I read, it is a good idea to just jump right into those books and see what my thoughts are. I'm gonna go in chronological order, because at the beginning of the month, I was actually a very good person. I read so many books of my physical TBR, but I read Belladonna, and I had a blast. Let me tell you. Belladonna is like a gothic dark fantasy, and the main character, Signa, she has the powers of death, okay? She can do what death can do. This is a fantasy romance, by the way, and it is beautiful, it is stunning. I had a blast. I love the characters. It took me a little while to get into the book, just because it was a little slow at the beginning and I didn't exactly know what to expect of it. But as soon as I was further into the book, I was very, very hooked. I was very, very interested, and I had a very good time. This book is set in the Regency era, which is one of my favorite eras to be in books. It's perfect. You will see that later. I read a lot of Regency era books last month. So Belladonna was a good time, a fun time, a good book to read, and I'm very excited to start reading the second one, which is Foxglove. I have that already, and I am ready to read this. Probably this month, honestly, because I cannot wait to know how this story progresses. Also, I have to say that Death is 100% my favorite character, and nobody can tell me otherwise. The next book that I read is this one. This is the hit. This is a Kindle Unlimited book. I read this very, very fast because I just needed something to balance out Belladonna. Belladonna was great, but it was also a lot, and it was very dark, deep fantasy, so I needed some spicy romance to get out of that, and that's what this was, honestly. Essentially, this is about a guy who is a hitman, and he's supposed to take out this girl, the female main character, okay? But he kind of messes up, and he's like, oh, but she's so innocent, and her brother is the person who actually does bad things. So instead of unaliving her, he decides to save her, grab her, and bring her to his hut in the woods and play house with her. In case you cannot tell by my description of this book, I did not have a blast, okay? It was kind of a mafia romance-ish book, but I didn't have a good time, okay? I had a good enough time that it was fun to read, but was it a good book? I would say probably not. Just maybe not my favorite of the month, okay? Maybe not my favorite. And then after that, the next book that I read was The Nanny by Lana Ferguson. I don't know how this happened, but this book was my favorite book of the month. It was my favorite book in February, and I don't know how, but it was. We have, obviously, a nanny romance. Be careful, there is age gap in here, okay? And the cover might trick you, but this book is like very, very spicy. All of Lana Ferguson's books are very, very spicy. So just take this as a warning and proceed with the book, because it's great. Although if you don't like spice, maybe this is not for you. Just putting that out there for you guys. It's a really fun book, and you want to know why? I'm gonna tell you. Okay, so the female main character, she needs money. She lost her job and she needs money. So what does she do? She decides to nanny for this guy. But the issue is that about a year ago, she had like an OnlyFans, which obviously isn't called OnlyFans, but essentially was an OnlyFans, and she stopped doing that because she fell in love with a guy. But as it happens, the guy who she's nannying for, so the dad, he's the guy she fell in love with a year ago. Suddenly he's in her life again, and he's just a good guy. That's the most important thing about this. He's just a good guy, and I loved him. It was overall just an easy read. It was enjoyable. The kid in this was so cute. I like this. I had a very good time, which is probably why this is my favorite of the month, okay? It's just like that. I had a blast. But let's move on to the next book, which is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This was so much fun. It's about a arranged marriage between a vampire and a werewolf to keep up the peace in the world that they've built, because apparently that's the only way to keep the peace, is to marry a vampire girl to a werewolf guy. Let's just say it is the perfect mixture of supernatural and romance. If you're not usually a fantasy reader, you will probably still enjoy this because it's so much focus on the romance that you barely register the fantasy aspect of it. But you have just a lot of the classic werewolf things. This is definitely like Omegaverse, so if you're not really well versed in that... That was a horrible joke. Anyway, if you're not well versed in that, just maybe this is a good place to start, I would think, because it introduces you very well to all of the things that happen in the Omegaverse. I had a good time with this, and I'm pretty sure that most of you will also have a good time with this book. I can only encourage you to read it. It's good. I feel like that's my general consensus of this month, is it's good. Everything is fine. And then the next book that I read is also one of my favorites of the month, and that is Circe. For some reason, I pushed Circe away for so long. I don't know why exactly I didn't want to read it. Probably because the Song of Achilles traumatized me, and I just wasn't ready to be traumatized again. But once I picked up Circe, honestly, I was just hooked. This book is definitely worth every second of the hype. Essentially, this one is the story of Circe. Now, Circe is one of the Greek gods, so we have Greek mythology, right? Circe is the daughter of the sun god Helios, and she is the goddess of witchcraft. And for that, because she is the goddess of witchcraft, and she can essentially do things that are extremely powerful, including maybe killing a god. It's in her power set, okay? She could do that. She is then banished to an island. It feels like you're kind of reading Circe's diary a little bit. Overall, really great time, really fun, really good, understandable, and I did enjoy that they changed a few bits and pieces around just to make you understand and relate to Circe more, so that she's not the villain in this story. Like, she is not the villain, she is the nice person, the one who's a little misunderstood. And that's Circe, and I had a blast. And now we have the time where my exam season started, okay? And with the start of my exam season also started my Kindle Unlimited Mafia Romance obsession. Let's go through these because I read an entire series. Okay, so the first Kindle Unlimited book I read was Distance by Luna Mason. Do I remember anything about this book without looking it up? Absolutely not. The only thing I remember is that it was Mafia Romance, which is technically the only thing I need to remember about it. In this case, we have the good mafia, okay? We're dealing with a good mafia again. So the main character in this book is Keller, and Keller is like some kind of underground street fighter who becomes the enforcer of the mafia for some reason. And then he meets this girl and he needs to protect her. The book itself was alright, okay? It's just a classic mafia romance story. It was a fun time. It was like a 3 stars, so I technically would recommend this one. The second book in that series is Detonate. This one is a little bit of a different one, I would say. It's still a mafia romance, right? But we have a few tropes that some people maybe don't like. We have an accidental pregnancy trope. We have some kidnapping going on. It's just a lot. Just a lot. By the way, I feel like all of these books are just rewritten in a different font. They're all very, very similar. The pregnancy trope happens in like every other book. It's a lot. And I have to say with this one, I just wasn't feeling the spice as much. I was just like, okay, we get it. It's getting out of hand. If that's your thing, read these. It's not personally my thing. It was just a little too much for me. And then after that, I read Devoted, which is the third book in that series. Another mafia romance. Another book that's essentially nothing special, nothing extraordinary. I felt like this one was a little all over the place. It was arranged marriage kind of stuff. I wasn't really having it with this one. It was just, all of these books, they kind of bled into each other a lot, and I usually like arranged marriages in books, obviously, but this one, I kind of wasn't rooting for anything at any point. I did, however, like that they actually communicated, which was important, and led to a lot less miscommunication. So that was good in the end. I did enjoy that. And then the last one of this series, the fourth one, was my favorite. This is Detained, and let me tell you, the reason I like this so much is because Zara, the main character, the female main character, she is not a damsel in distress, okay? She can fight. She is set out to sabotage people. She hits punches left and right. She can shoot. She can do everything. And she doesn't need a man to save her. However, this is a huge age gap. I think it's over 10 years of an age gap. So again, if that's not your cup of tea, this might not be the book for you. But this was my favorite in the series. So I like this one. You can technically, by the way, read all of these without reading the other. Like I said, I read the second book first, and sure, that was a little bit of a spoiler for the first one because I knew some things and other people didn't know other things, but it was fine, honestly. You can just read whichever one you want. If you just want to read one of those, I would advise you to read the fourth one because that was my favorite, but you do you, guys. You do you. And then I went into my Regency era phase. Whatever this was, it was a thing, okay? I found a Kindle Unlimited series that was just amazing. It was essentially spice-free Bridgerton, and I had the best time ever, okay? The first one was this one, Lady Ludmilla's Accidental Letter. And I still remember what this is about, which means it must have been good, okay? So we have Lady Ludmilla, also known as Lou, and Lou sends a letter to a friend of hers, but turns out that friend of hers doesn't actually live there anymore, and the guy who suddenly is just there at the house sends a letter back, and they start a friendship, but neither of them know who the other person is. I had an absolute blast reading this. It was so fun. It was such a cute one. And I was just happy. I was feeling bubbly. I was feeling giggly. This is like probably the only type of love triangle I ever enjoyed, even though it's not technically really a love triangle because throughout the whole book you're just like rooting for one person. But it was fun. It was really, really fun and I had a very good time. And then I read the second book in that series, which is Miss Ava's Scandalous Secret. I didn't enjoy this as much just because there was a lot of miscommunication in this one. But let me tell you what it's about. We have the main character. It's like Regency era again, okay, if you cannot tell by the cover. But we have the main character and she is an opera singer. But that is a scandalous thing to be because opera singers in that time were like usually known for like sleeping around. She then did something weird where she was like putting on like almost a mask and fake teeth and a wig and stuff just so that nobody would recognize her in reality, and then she accidentally gets engaged to this guy, and this guy is also like trying to get the opera singer's attention. And it's just overall a whole thing, and I had a fun time. It was a cute little romance. I completely forget his name, okay? But that's not important. We don't really care about his name. He's just the guy. But he was kind of nice. He was kind of a cutie. He was a little bit shy and awkward, which I quite enjoyed. So I had a good time with this one. It was a fun book, and I would actually say that I recommend this and that I'm excited for the third book to come out. I might actually get these books as paperbacks to put on my historical romance shelf because I liked them. They were fun and they were completely spice-free, which I really enjoyed. Yeah, and after that I read another werewolf book. I thought that my werewolf phase would start now, and so I read this one, which is Rabid. And this was just not it, okay? This was on the same level as all of the Wattpad werewolf stories that I read in like 2015 when I had a phase that I never grew out of, but anyway, it just wasn't anything special. I realized that I didn't really enjoy the kind of werewolf stories anymore that are like, you're in the pack and then you go into heat and there's different packs fighting each other and you're like somewhere secluded in the woods with just other werewolves and like this one's the alpha and I'm so weak, I can't do anything. No, I didn't like it. It was essentially just another like wolf pack in the woods kind of storyline where you have a wolf that runs away from her pack where she was mistreated, and then she runs into the big bad alpha and suddenly they're mates, and that's just like their whole thing, okay? That was the book. It wasn't bad, but it definitely wasn't good. And then I counted all of these as 5 individual books, but we're gonna just talk about them as one book because I do not know how to separate this. And it is the Mindfuck series. Let me tell you that I was scared to read this book, okay? I expected this to be like Haunting Adeline 2.0, like similar, but it wasn't. This was amazing. I would probably say this is very similar to Butcher and Blackbird, which is also a book that I very much enjoyed last year. We have a serial killer and an FBI agent who fall in love. So she is a serial killer, and he's the FBI agent, and they fall in love. She knows that he is an FBI agent. He doesn't know that she is the serial killer that he is looking for. His job specifically is to find serial killers. It's just so good. It is very, very gory, very, very bloody, very, very brutal, and definitely not for people who don't like all of that. It is surprisingly less spicy than I thought, which was something that I enjoyed. I would have hated it if the spice was just like overshadowing the plot, but the plot was actually so good, and I just had a good time with this one, okay? Like, it wasn't extraordinarily good, but I would still rate the entire series like a 3.5 to 4 stars. I had a good time. I like this. Maybe because I actually kind of like romance books with like a thriller aspect, and this kind of felt like this. It was also very traumatizing because there are a few like trigger warnings in the book, so definitely read those and see if anything triggers you, and so just don't do that. But for example, there are a few non-consensual scenes that are in the past, but they're not romanticized. I don't like that. So in this case, they're not romanticizing all the bad stuff like they do in other dark romances sometimes. So overall, I had a good time because they weren't doing that. You get what I mean? I hope you get what I mean. And with that, we're coming to the last book we're gonna talk about, which is this one, okay? You can skip this part if you want to. If you don't want to skip it, you're welcome to stay here, okay? But House of Flame and Shadow was probably one of my least favorite books of this month. I had a horrible time reading it. I read it and I was just, the whole time I was thinking, when is it over? Why is this happening? What's the purpose of this book? I had a lot of issues with it. I think the most prominent issue that I had was the POV change. So we're having different POVs, but instead of changing them once per chapter, she was changing them like every 2 or 3 pages. And it got to the point where I was just so confused as to what was going on, who was talking, who was thinking. And then I just didn't care anymore. I didn't care for anybody. And I kind of feel like this book kind of ruined this world for me, which is very sad. But it's what happened. And I did not have a good time. And I wish I had a good time, but I didn't. And for the fact that this is like 830 pages worth of fantasy and battles and finding stuff out, there were like 70 pages where I was like, this is good. This is a really good book. And so I decided that this book was definitely not worth my time. It wasn't worth reading. And I was very disappointed by it because I was so excited for it. And it just didn't really deliver, in my opinion. But yeah, definitely, let me tell you if you have different opinions on any of these books. So just like put it in the comments. I would love to hear about your opinions on those books. And yeah, with that, I think we're done. Which is weird, but also fun. And I hope you had a good time, because I definitely did. And now I have to put all of those books back on the shelf. Yay! I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to leave a like and subscribe if you don't already, and I will see you for the next video that I make. Bye! I just hope I didn't forget anything. I sometimes get very confused. By the way, these are the fan fictions I read. It's just 3 fan fictions. It's Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love, The Disappearance of Draco Malfoy, and Who I Was With You. I rated them in this order: 3.5 stars, 5 stars, and 3 stars. So I would say it's pretty good. I just had a blast. And I think those fanfictions still count as books because honestly, The first two were like over 250,000 words, and that's a lot. And then the third one was like a little under 100,000 words, but still, it was a lot, okay? I read for hours and hours and days and days. So yeah. Anyway, hope you have an awesome day. Goodbye!